You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. At the end of this show, you're going to get the interview that I did with Bill Ryczek, the author of the book on Dick Stuart. Really nice guy, enjoyed talking to him. This show is going to be a little different. Basically, I recorded a usual show, but my computer crashed. I lost the recording. And I don't have much time to re-record. So what I'm going to do is, in essence, a Cliff Notes version of this show. I'm going to hit on the main points of the big stories. It's going to be kind of fast. I'm sorry. If you want to flesh it out a little bit more, please feel free to tweet at me at RealJacobValk. I'll be happy to expand on it. I'll start with Nets-Bucks. A game that the Nets should have won. They just got off to a slow start. And they were never really able to recover from that. I mean, they were down by 19 after one quarter of play. They came back. They were only down by 3 at the half. But overall, they couldn't put the ball in the ocean. The final score was 86-83. These are two high-powered offenses that just no-showed. Both teams were good defensively, but they weren't great. All anyone's talking about is what happened at the end of the game. There's 25 seconds left, and the Nets run a pick and roll with Kyrie Irving and Bruce Brown as the roller. Irving gets the ball to Brown. Brown tries to float it in over Brook Lopez. It falls short. Then Jrue Holiday puts a nice move on Joe Harris and Brown to score what would turn into the game-winning basket for the Bucks. That was a terrible job by the Nets. Bruce Brown cannot be the shooter there. Out of everyone on the floor for the Nets, Bruce Brown was the last guy on earth that should have been taking that shot. That was just a terrible job by the Nets. That's what I want people to get upset about, not what happened afterwards. That was a broken play. It was a bad inbound. Kyrie got the ball to Brown. Brown did have a wide open lane, but Lopez recovered quickly. Brown probably didn't know how much time he had left to shoot, so he tried to make something happen. I don't blame him for that. It's a bad look that Bruce Brown took 2 of the 3 last shots. There's no question. The first one is inexcusable. The second one, that was a broken play. Brown did the best he could. That didn't bother me too much. I mean, I don't want to see people getting on Brown too much. Without Bruce Brown, the Nets aren't anywhere near winning that game because Brown was their 3rd best player. He had 16 points and 11 rebounds. Look, without him, the Nets aren't anywhere near beating the Bucks. Because let's be honest, Kevin Durant was ineffective through the first half of that game. He only had 7 points. Through the first half, Brown was the leading scorer for the Nets. Then Durant took over in the second half. I give him credit. I love Durant. But he's got to step up more in the first half. It's just that simple. Look, the Nets had every opportunity to win this game, and they were without their second best player in James Harden and their sixth man in Jeff Green. If even one of those two guys play on Sunday, the Nets are winning. And if one of them had played yesterday, the Nets are winning. Okay, it's just that simple. That was a tough loss, there's no question, but it's not doom and gloom. This game on Sunday is a must-win, though. The Nets want to put their foot on the throat of the Bucks, because the Bucks aren't going to win 3 straight, and the Bucks want to make this a best 2 out of 3. This game on Sunday is incredibly important. And I do give the Nets credit for stepping up on defense, doing a good job of limiting everyone not named Giannis and Chris Middleton. The Bucks didn't win, the Nets lost. The Bucks were just a hair better than the Nets, but that wasn't a high bar to clear. Neither team could put the ball in the ocean. Moving on now to Clippers Jazz. Bad job by the Clippers. Paul George no-showed in the first half. Kawhi Leonard no-showed in the second half. Ty Lue did a terrible job of adjusting defensively to try to stop Donovan Mitchell. The Jazz are by far and away the better team in this series. Mitchell dominated. He had 37 points. Rudy Gobert had 20 boards. Jordan Clarkson did his thing off the bench. Joe Ingles and Bojan Bogdanovic were excellent shooters. That's what they do. You can't have Reggie Jackson be the best Clipper and expect to see LA win. It seems like we're on our way towards getting a Jazz-Suns Western Conference Finals. The casual NBA fan may not like that. The NBA may not like it, but the diehard NBA fan who realizes that they were the 2 best teams in the West all throughout the year will like it. And I don't care that I got both those picks wrong, if that's what ends up happening. It'll be fun to see some new blood in the Western Conference Finals. On to tonight's games. I know I'm going pretty fast. I don't have a choice. I'm sorry. Like I said, please feel free to tweet at me, @RealJacobValk. This has never happened before. It may have happened once, but I had more time to record. Today I just don't. I think the Sixers are going to win this game. Ben Simmons has shown that he can lock down Trae Young. I'd like Simmons to do a little bit more offensively, because he can't expect Joel Embiid to go off for 40, and he can't expect Seth Curry to go off for 21 again. But I think Simmons will step it up offensively while still providing great defense. I'd look for the Hawks to get the ball down low to Capella and Collins, make Embiid work. If they get doubled, they can kick it out to the wide open shooter, whether it's Young, Bogdanovic, Herter, Gallinari, or Lou Will. But I picked the Sixers in 5. I'm going to stick with it. The Sixers are winning this game. Suns Nuggets. I don't see how the Suns lose this game. They are clicking on all cylinders right now. They don't need to change anything. They are by far and away the better team in this series. The Nuggets are missing Jamal Murray a lot. No one stepped up for the Nuggets in Game 2 outside of Nikola Jokic. If that happens again, the Nuggets are dead in the water. Someone else needs to step up, whether it's Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., Will Barton, Monte Morris, whoever. But I'd be a fool to pick against the Suns here the way this series has unfolded. I gotta go with the Suns. The NHL Valk talk, I'll just narrow down to semifinals picks and Brad Larson. If the Islanders beat the Bruins, they can beat the Lightning. I understand that the Lightning beat them last year in the bubble, but it's very hard to beat the same team in back-to-back years in the playoffs. This is a better Islanders team. It's an Islanders team with Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac, who my buddy Jim doesn't want to see out of the lineup, even if Oliver Wahlstrom's 100%. I don't blame him. The Islanders have shown that they can win with 2 goalies. Ilya Sorokin won that series against the Penguins, and Semyon Varlamov won that series against the Bruins. Whatever Barry Trotz does is going to work. The Bruins and Lightning are very similar. The Bruins have the perfection line. Meanwhile, the Lightning have Andre Palat, Braden Point, and Nikita Kucherov. All great playoff performers. The Bruins have Charlie McAvoy, the Lightning have Victor Hedman. The Bruins have Tuukka Rask, the Lightning have Andrei Vasilevsky. Very similar teams. The Islanders have shown that they can beat the Bruins. I think they can beat the Lightning. Call me biased if you want, but I'm going to say Islanders in 6. As for Golden Knights, Canadiens, it's just going to come down to what offense steps up. You know that Carey Price is going to do his thing. You know that Marc-Andre Fleury is going to do his thing. Which offense is going to show up? I have more faith in the Golden Knights offense than I do the Habs offense. The Habs have Tyler Toffoli, Jeff Petrie, Nick Suzuki, and Tomas Tatar. That's it. Tyler Toffoli had 44 points this year. That would place him tied for 3rd on the Golden Knights. He'd be tied with Marchessault. The Golden Knights have Mark Stone, Max Pacioretty, Shea Theodore, William Karlsson, Alex Pietrangelo. I just don't like this matchup for the Habs. I think the Golden Knights are better, and I think they're going to win in 5 games. As for the Brad Larson hire, I don't know too much about him. I'm not going to kill him. I will say this. There were a bunch of better candidates out there. Gerard Gallant, Mike Babcock, Lane Lambert. Even a guy like Brad Shaw, who was a Blue Jackets assistant, was the more qualified guy for this job if the Blue Jackets wanted to stay in the family. I don't want to kill Brad Larson before he gets going. I don't know anything about him, but there were better hires to be made. I don't like this move by the Blue Jackets. Alright, here's my interview with Bill Ryczek. You're listening to the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and right now I'm joined by Bill Ryczek, the author of Dr. Strangeglove, The Life and Times of All-Star Slugger Dick Stuart. Bill, how are you?
I'm good, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing good. So, how quickly did Stuart establish himself as a great slugger in the Pirates minor league system?
He really started when he was at Billings, Montana. He led the Pioneer League in home runs twice, but his big claim to fame and what made him a national figure was when he hit 66 home runs at Lincoln in 1956. And no matter what Stuart ever did in his career, 1956 was the biggest year of his life. He got on the national stage for a minor leaguer. He got an incredible amount of national publicity, and everybody knew who Dick Stuart was. And once they found him, Dick made sure they didn't forget him.
Yeah, I mean, 66 home runs. I don't care what league that is, the American League, the National League, the Western League, the Atlantic League. That is an incredibly impressive number.
And what was even more incredible is that he injured his wrist later in the season, and he was on pace to hit somewhere between 70 and 75, and then went into a slump the last few weeks. He hit 60 very quickly.
Oh, wow. Okay, that I didn't know. So when did the Pirates realize that Stuart was a terrible fielder?
The first time he ever put on a glove. He was bad. Not like he was good when he was young and he got worse. He started playing the outfield. And when his first year in minor league ball, it was clear he was not a good outfielder. He didn't concentrate. And they moved him into first base because they figured he'd concentrate a little more. But he did. And as I said, what made Stuart unique as a bad fielder, he's not the only bad fielder in the history of Major League Baseball, but most bad fielders either deny they're bad fielders or they pledge to get better. He didn't either. He made a joke of it. He didn't care. He always made jokes about his fielding.
Hey, I mean, if you're bad, just own it, right?
Well, that would be your comment. That was not most of his managers' attitude. It is, and pitchers and teammates, they liked him later in his career because he was a gregarious, kind of likable guy. But as Vern Law said, I liked him. I would have liked him a lot better if he paid a little more attention to his fielding and took better care of himself.
Was there ever a moment when Danny Murtaugh just wanted to wring his neck and say, get your head screwed on straight?
There probably was, but there weren't many because Murtaugh was a good manager for Stuart. He was really low-key. When Stuart first came up in spring training with the Pirates, Bobby Bragan was the Pirates manager. And Bobby was intense, he was mouthy, and he and Stuart clashed. And Stuart's lack of concern about fielding and hustling really set Bragan off. He was ready to kill him. Murtaugh was one of those guys who, if something went wrong, he'd just spit out his tobacco, throw a rock, and say, darn, get him next time. He was good for Stuart. Stuart had some managers. Larry Shepard was good for him. Other managers, you just knew he was going to clash because they took baseball far more seriously than Dick did.
Right. Well, I mean, that's true for all players. Some managers are better for player X than other managers. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Oh, no question. And it's interesting having talked to a lot of retired major leaguers. Their idea of a good manager was one who played them a lot. You'd ask somebody, what would be a good manager? Not that he knew human nature. He was a good strategist. He was a great manager. Gave me the ball every 4 days. And that's their idea of a great manager. That's sort of life in general. We like people who like us.
Well, that's why we're friends, because we like each other, right, Bill?
That's right.
So, what can you tell us about Stuart's rookie season?
He came up in July, and he had 31 home runs at Salt Lake City, and they brought him up. And the Pirates at that time in the 50s had been terrible. They'd been in last place just about every year in the early 50s, and they were starting to come alive in 1958 when he came up. They had a lot of young players come in, like Bob Friend, Vern Law, Dick Grote, Bill Verdon, Bill Mazeroski, and they were starting to mature around 58. He got off to a flying start, which he always seemed to do. Whenever he came into a new town, he always did something spectacular. He usually hit a home run the first game, and he did. He hit a home run his first game with the Pirates and wound up having a really good half season. The Pirates finished second, which was like anyone else winning the championship. They got a parade in Pittsburgh. The fans were just ecstatic because they'd been last every year. And what gave a tip-off on what his teammates thought of him, though, they went to split up the postseason money because in those days, everybody in the first division, which was the first 4 of 8, got some type of postseason money. And they split up the Pirates' money, and they gave Stuart a smaller share than everyone would have expected. And the story was they didn't like him. He was too arrogant, boastful. I interviewed Bob Friend, and Bob said, I think we made good on that, but they didn't. The early Stuart was not a likable guy. Later on, he mellowed out a little bit. They liked him. They did not like him when he first came up. Too self-centered, too arrogant. And in those days, that was pre-social media. He didn't say things like that. People were supposed to be self-effacing, modest, not telling everybody how great they are.
And Stuart was telling anyone who would listen how great of a slugger he was, right?
How great a slugger he was. And he thought he was a very handsome guy. He always worried about his appearance. He was known for standing in front of the locker room mirror, combing his hair he and Bo Bolensky were the 2 champions at hair combing. Yeah, it was only Dick Stewart, and what a great hitter he was.
Oh, man. Talking to Bill Ryczek, the author of Dr. Strangeglove, The Life and Times of All-Star Slugger Dick Stewart, here on the Jacob Valk Show. I'm Jacob Valk. So, can you lay out Ted Kluszewski's impact on Stewart's first 2 Major League seasons?
Well, the main reason Stuart was there, one, he was having a great season, but two, Kozuski, who was one of the great sluggers in the National League in the early and mid-1950s, had a back problem. And it really was so debilitating. He was never a great power hitter again. And that's why Stuart came up. And for 2 years, he and Kozuski were somewhat alternating at first base, but Stuart was clearly the younger, the healthier. And Kozuski did not really mentor him. He later became a great hitting coach. But in those days, there was not a lot of coaching. George Sisler was the Pirates' batting coach, and he worked with Stuart quite a bit. But Kozuski was supportive. Kozuski was just a nice guy. It wasn't a matter of, you're taking my job, kid. I'm going to take you down. He was supportive of him, and he wound up being traded to the White Sox, where he was a World Series hero. So it worked out for him.
Yeah, and Kozuski did go on to be hitting coach for the Reds for those great Big Red Machine teams of the 70s. So happy ending for everyone. I like that.
Except Ted did die relatively young of a heart attack. I don't recall how old, but I think in his 50s. He was relatively young.
He was 63.
Oh, he was that old in Ronzan.
Yeah, 63 years old when he died. Still young, but I guess it could be a little worse.
Yep.
So back to Stuart, something a little more positive, although not for me as a Yankees fan. How would you describe Stuart's 1960 season?
Well, his 1960 season was a good one, not a great one, and you really should divide it into regular season. He didn't play as much as he wanted to. Rocky Nelson played a lot, but he had a good season. He hit, if I recall correctly, 23 home runs while not playing full-time. But in 1960, the big thing was the World Series, because every player dreams of being in a World Series. They got the national stage, and in those days, the World Series was the big thing. It was like the Super Bowl. Now the World Series is one of many sporting events, but in those days, everything stopped. Businesses shut down. Lyndon Johnson was in the middle of the presidential campaign, running for vice president, wanted to come to Pittsburgh and campaign, and the governor said, not while the World Series is on. You come in here, you do by yourself. The court shut down at noon. Big deal. And here is Stuart with his ego. He's going to be on the national stage and be a hero. And he was terrible. He was 3 for 20. He didn't field well. And here is Game 7, a big, egotistical, big game guy. He's on the bench. But in the ninth inning, the score was tied. Bill Mazeroski was leading off. Harvey Haddix was on deck. Murtaugh told Stuart to hit for Haddix. He went to the on-deck circle thinking he's going to end the game, be a hero. The series hasn't gone well for him, but he's got his one big chance. Mazeroski is going to do whatever he's going to do. Doesn't matter if he gets on, makes an out. Stuart's going to hit a home run. The last thing in the world he thought Mazeroski was going to do, because Maz was not a power hitter, was end the game with a home run, which he did. And Stuart said afterwards to Mazeroski, people came to see me hit the home run, not you, Bill. And he was joking, but he was so disappointed. That was the most disappointing thing that ever happened to him. And that's how I started the book. He said, this close to glory. Could have been, probably should have been more than he was, but never quite was.
Was he rooting for Mazeroski to make out or just get a single or something? Was he
I'm sure he was rooting for Mazeroski to do anything but end the game. He was rooting for Mazeroski to do whatever it took to get him to the plate. I'm sure that's what he was pulling for.
Lovely. So what can you tell us about Stuart's 1961 season?
Well, that was one of Dick's best. It was certainly his best as a Pirate. And it was the one he broke out. He made the All-Star team, hit 35 home runs, hit 301. It was the first year he played every game. He went in May, he went on Harry Carey's radio show and said, I really am not good playing part-time. I need to play full-time, which is somewhat of an ultimatum, play me or trade me. But Murtaugh said, well, put him in, see what he can do. Rocky Nelson wasn't hitting. So Stuart wound up playing every game, pretty much the rest of the season, hit 35 home runs. In those days, they played 2 All-Star games. He played in both. And it was a breakout season for him. And unfortunately, 62, it all came crashing down. He had a terrible year.
Talking to Bill Ryczek, the author of Dr. Strangeglove, The Life and Times of All-Star Slugger Dick Stuart, here on the Jacob Valk Show. I'm Jacob Valk. You brought up 1962, perfect segue. A bunch of things went wrong for Stuart that year. I don't even know where to start, Bill. The slow start, Don Clendenin coming up. Where do you want to go first? I really have no idea where to start.
Well, when Stuart came off his big 61 season, it was the first time he went to spring training knowing he was going to start all the time because he was an all-star. And he got off to a terrible start, which he normally did. And everybody was patient. Murtaugh said, well, he'll come around. They can't hold him down all year. He'll start to hit. When the weather gets warm, he'll start to hit. But he never started to hit. And Clendenin, of course, was a very talented player who wound up playing a long time in the major leagues. He was down at Columbus, and he could do a lot of things Stuart couldn't do. What was ironic, though, is they replaced Stuart with Clendenin eventually. One of the two of the big raps on Stuart were he was a lousy fielder, and two, he struck out too much. Clendenin led the National League first baseman in errors several years and also set strikeout records. So they didn't do much better with Clendenin. Oh, Clendenin clearly was a better all-around player. He's much more athletic than Stuart ever was.
Right. It's kind of funny. Stuart squeezes Ted Kluszewski out of a job. Don Clendenin squeezes Dick Stewart out of a job. What are your thoughts on that, the dichotomy there?
Well, funny, after that, Stuart only squeezed himself out of a job. If you look at going forward after that, because Stuart was getting a little older. And when he went to Boston, they just tired of him after 2 years. He wore out his welcome, and they were supposed to replace him with Tony Horton or Bobby Glendon. And, they clearly didn't squeeze him out of a job. They were just the only guys who might have taken over. They just wanted to get rid of him. And then in 65, at the end of season in Philadelphia, they just wanted to get rid of him, even if they didn't have anybody to replace him. So he wasn't getting squeezed out of jobs so much as he was wearing out his welcome. The Phillies eventually got Bill White, which meant that Stuart was gone. But, and one good thing is that Stuart, when he was traded, generally got good value. When he went from the Pirates to the Red Sox got Don Schwall and Jim Pagliarone. The Pirates got, and the Red Sox got Jack LeMaitre and Stuart, and that was just a one-sided deal. Stuart had 2 great years there. Then when they traded the Phillies, the Red Sox got Dennis Bennett, who was a sore-arm pitcher who was out of baseball very quickly. So he generally gave good value. Then he wound up signing with the Mets and Dodgers and Angels for basically nothing. There were no players involved of any magnitude.
Kind of interesting how things like that work out. So obviously, Stuart had the bad year in 62. 63, he has a little bit of a renaissance, places highest in MVP voting that he'd ever placed, 13th. Why did Stuart have that renaissance in 63? Was Fenway Park that good for him?
Fenway Park was a lot of it. As you said, Forbes Field was a huge park. It was way too big for him. Right. You look at the Pirates; they hardly hit any home runs. It was for line drive hitters. Left field was I don't remember how many feet it was, but it was a long poke. And Fenway was just a much better park for him. You look at some of the balls he hit into the net at Fenway; they would have been outs at Forbes Field. And it was a new league. He did well. He adapted well to the pitchers. They didn't know him, and he led the league in runs batted in 63. In 2 years, he had, I remember the numbers because he kept repeating them, 75 homers, 232 runs batted in, which are 2 very productive years.
Yeah, absolutely. Stuart was a really good Red Sox. I
want to stop you right there because you say he was a really good Red Sox. You need to add one more word, really good Red Sox hitter.
Well, yeah, okay.
He was not a real good team player, and one of the things that got him out of Boston was that he and Carl Yastrzemski made Johnny Pesky's life miserable. Pesky was his first 2 seasons as manager, and they just drove him crazy. And, Stuart with his antics, and Yastrzemski was just stabbing him in the back. And it's interesting that Pesky years later liked Stuart. He said, I love the big lug. He's just a big kid. Did not like Yastrzemski. He thought Yastrzemski was just out to get him. Said Stuart never talked behind your back. He just was who he was. But the two of them just made Pesky crazy in 2 years.
Yeah, no, Stuart did things to drive you nuts. I was just more focusing on the 2 good seasons where he hit over 30 home runs and hit over 110 RBIs. But you're right that he made Johnny Pesky's life hell. There's no question about that.
He was an excellent hitter, and if you take away all the off-the-field stuff and the defense, they would have loved him. He would have been, and as you say, he was high in the MVP voting one year, and deservedly so.
No question.
One thing he didn't do was make the All-Star team when he was in Boston, and that was a source of great displeasure to him.
Ralph Houck.
63, Ralph Houck was in charge of choosing the extra players. And even though Stuart was second in the voting, he didn't pick him. And Stuart went on his television show. He hosted a sports show on Sunday nights and ripped up Houck's picture on the air. Now that's just common theater, but then that was really big stuff. And he and Houck had a running feud, which became a big joke later on. Houck played along at the banquets, but he really got on Houck. He said, "Who is this guy? He's a third-string catcher. He doesn't know anything about All-Stars. He just got the job because they booted Casey Stengel out." And he was very, very unhappy about not making the All-Star team. And same thing in 64, that he didn't get picked for the game.
Yeah, no, I could see how that would upset Stuart. Even as a Yankees fan, I'll admit that Stuart should have made the All-Star team over Joe Pepitone. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
I think so. Yeah, I'm a Yankee fan as well, and I was around in those years, so I do remember that. I mean, Stuart and Pepitone were a little bit alike. Pepitone was as screwy as Stuart was. Yeah,
not an easy guy to get along with, Pepitone. You have to be very, very rigid with him. I know that. So, 1964, one of my favorite movies comes out, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Fantastic movie, Stanley Kubrick, messed up guy, great director. Who was the first person to call Stuart Dr. Strangeglove?
Good question.
Thank you.
I don't know. Some people said it was Bob Prince, but Bob Prince was the Pirate announcer and Stuart was with the Pirates before the movie came out. A lot of people said it was Henry Aaron, which it could have been. Those are the two names I've heard bandied about. I don't know.
Have you ever seen Dr. Strangelove?
No, I never have.
Are you serious?
I'm serious, yes.
Oh, Bill, here's what you're going to do, okay? When we're done talking, you're going to rent that movie, and then you're going to email me and tell me how much you love it, okay?
Deal.
Okay, great movie. Has one of my favorite lines in movie history. The last line of the movie is hysterical. I don't want to give anything away, but very, very well done. Talking to Bill Ryczek, the author of Dr. Strangeglove, The Life and Times of All-Star Slugger Dick Stewart, here on the Jacob Valk Show. I'm Jacob Valk, and evidently I also moonlight as a movie critic. So what can you tell us about Stewart's 1965 season?
Gene Mauch said before the season that he could handle Stuart. Knew him from California. Said, I can take care of him. He's a good slugger. He's going to be beneficial here. By the end of the season, he was lined up with all the other Stewart's managers and said, I can't take another minute of him. He had a lot of adventures. He used to have attention lapses. Forget the number of outs and run off the field after the second out, not know where the base runners were. Strange things always happened to him. And he just drove Gene Mauch nuts because if you remember, in 1964, the Phillies had blown a huge lead late in the season. And
running in short.
A lot of trauma in Philadelphia, which they were determined to overcome in 65 by winning the pennant. And they never were really serious contenders. So Stuart was a disappointment. He had a low average, which then was considered a bad thing. People were very concerned with batting averages then. He had 234. But,
can I just say really fast, batting average to me is still important. I will take a high batting average over a high on-base percentage any day of the week. I don't know where you fall on that spectrum, but that's where I fall on it.
Well, interesting you say that because I have a good friend of mine who we had somewhat of a disagreement on that. I'm more in your camp, and I said that base on balls are important, but they're not nearly as important as hits because runners don't move. And in many cases, it's considered a good thing by the defense because they either give you an intentional walk or a semi-intentional walk. So if it was so good, why would they be doing it to you?
Right.
You don't see a hitter come to the plate and say, "Oh my God, this guy could draw a walk. It's just not a fear. It's the hitters. I'm on your side there.
Thank you. So, can you lay out Stuart's 1966 season?
That was a shock to Stuart. Stuart, they wanted to get rid of him after the 65 season because they got Bill White. And
former Yankee announcer.
Right. And
one of my favorite Rizzuto moments, he's reading the teleprompter, and it goes, "Welcome to Yankees baseball. I'm Bill White." It was Rizzuto's line, but the teleprompter guy was having a little fun with him, and he put Bill White's name in. It was hysterical.
I remember that. Those two were great together.
Yes, they were.
And I was listening to an audio tape today. I have a big audio tape collection of old games and history and stuff like that. And so I think it was 1971 with Scooter, Frank Messer, and Bill White. So it was a great time. But we were talking about 66. They wanted to get rid of Stuart, and nobody wanted him. He was at that point, 31 years old. And 33 years old. And they couldn't get rid of him because he had a high salary. Nobody wanted to pay it. Nobody's willing to give up too much. Finally, the Mets just got him for 3 minor leaguers. And he was so defensive about it because here he is, an all-star, a big home run hitter. 2 years ago, he was leading the American League in runs batted in, traded for 3 minor leaguers. It was just such a shock to him. He kept rationalizing in a way how you'd have to pay $20,000 for each player, and that's $60,000, and my salary is $50,000. So they really paid a lot for me. And then with the Mets, he couldn't play because they had Mets had Ed Kranepool at first base. Kranepool was their big hope, big young bonus player, and it didn't work out with him and Stuart. Stuart wanted to play every day. He wasn't going to play every day. The Mets released him in, I think it was June, and that was a bigger shock. First, he's given away for almost nothing, and then he's released in the middle of the season. And knowing Stuart's ego, you can imagine how upset he was. Here, right. All of a sudden, he's unemployed. And he went to the Dodgers. He signed with the Dodgers, and he was a different player. He was a team player. He was trying. At that point, it's almost too late. The old saying, he didn't learn how to say hello until it was time to say goodbye. When he really became a team player and a hard player, running the bases well, doing all those things, he was at the end of the line. He got in another World Series, pinch hit a couple times, but that was pretty much the end of his major league career. He ended up going to Japan after that, of course.
Why did Stuart get his act together with the Dodgers? Was it a Walter Alston thing? Was it that he knew he'd contend for a World Series? Why did he suddenly fall in line?
Part of it was the second part was going to a contender. We went from going to Mets, who finished 9th that year, to a contender, so there's more incentive. I think the biggest thing was he realized the end was near. And he was always one of those guys who thought he'd play forever. He was a star. He could get away with whatever he wanted to. And you get released, all of a sudden you realize, I'm not a star anymore. I better try a little harder. I can't do what I did before because, you see that throughout baseball. Jim Bowden said about Richie Allen, he said, what stands between me and my mustache is about 35 home runs a year. When you can get away with individualism when you're a star. When you're pinch hitting and coming off the bench, you can't. They can find somebody else to do that who's less trouble. It was just a matter of him realizing that he really had to buckle down or he was going to be out of a job. And Stuart never saved money. Stuart was always a spendthrift. He was divorced twice. It wasn't as if he was financially secure. He didn't have any other job skills. Didn't go to college. He needed to play baseball.
It's kind of surprising to me that he didn't have any other skills, yet he took baseball so loosey-goosey. Is it fair to say that he just didn't have a lot of foresight in that regard?
I think it's absolutely correct. Dick was not a really bright guy. He was witty, he was quick, but he was not, deeply intelligent. He got out of high school and did poorly in high school. Went out and played baseball. He was a fun-loving guy, and that's one of the things I tried to get across was Dick. His big thing was having this image, this devil-may-care, fun-loving, wisecracking, talented guy, and that was his image. And I don't know what the real Dick Stuart was. I don't think that was it. He never let anybody know what it was. Didn't have a lot of close friends. He was a loner. Yeah, he was estranged from his children. He was, in many ways, kind of a sad guy. And once he stopped playing, nobody was really interested in him.
What did he do after baseball? I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but what did he do after baseball?
Okay, he wound up. He didn't do anything incredibly great. He worked for a commercial collection company most of his career. He went out doing marketing and sales. What he always tried to do was make a living on his name. And I actually interviewed somebody who had gotten to know and was a chief financial officer down in Connecticut. He said, Dick called on us. He showed up. He really didn't know much about his business. He couldn't remember the name of our company. And he just kept pulling out pictures of himself and Mickey Mantle and talking about his baseball days. Because he was a stockbroker. He worked for a stockbroker during his playing career in the off season, but he never learned anything. He just took clients out golfing, and he was just, as I said, when he played, he didn't have the diligence he needed to be a great player. He didn't have the discipline. And when it came to building a career, same thing. He never really he wanted to get paid for being Dick Stewart and never learned. He went to somebody, after he retired, he said, tell so-and-so I was asking about him, the owner of a brewery. Tell him I need a job. I'll work for $500 a week. And somebody said, what will you do? He said, I won't do anything. I just need the money. He just never wanted to bring any value once he got out of baseball, and never really was able to forge a career. And he became very reclusive. Said that his ex-wives were chasing him. People would say, where are you living? He said, well, California, or where? In the United States. He would never tell people where he was living, what he was doing. And I said, he always said people were looking for him, and maybe he didn't want to, admit that no one was looking for him. What's always amazed me, I've interviewed so many ex-athletes, that how fleeting fame is. You can be an all-star, but 10 years later, most people don't know who you are. I mean, if you went out on the street today and said, you remember, and pick some player from the 1990s who was maybe a starter for 3 or 4 years, most people would say, no, don't remember. Once you're not playing, it goes quickly. Right.
Well, even if you went to a Pirates game and you asked the Pirates fans in that beautiful ballpark, do you know who Dick Stewart was? They'd have no idea who Stewart was. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
No, well, when people say, what are you writing these days? And if they're baseball fans, I'll say I wrote a biography of Dick Stewart, and you get a lot of blank stares. And so I usually don't say Dick Stewart, who was a player in the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah, look, Stuart was a good player. Obviously, like you said, made a couple All-Star teams, had a few really good seasons. But you're right that he's a little obscure. What drew you to him?
Well, I was writing. I wrote a book on the New York Mets in the 1960s. I did a little Stuart digging just as part of the background for that, and just saw the lines he came up with, and all the things he said and did, and it was just so entertaining. And started digging into it, and said, this is the guy that I'd be interested in finding out more about. Difficult to get much on his personal life because he said was estranged. His dad was estranged from his children, was divorced. His ex-wife, at least one, is dead. I'm not sure if the other one is or not. I did get in touch with his sister-in-law, who gave me a lot. And what she really did was of great value was let me use a lot of family photos for the book. That I never could have gotten those otherwise. And she was just a nice lady, very helpful. Dick's brother has dementia, and this is his brother's wife. So he was not able to help out, but she was, and was just really nice. And one of the little things that happened that made me feel good was when we had the cover design come out. I sent it to her and said, we're getting close. We've got a cover design now. She took the design. She printed it out and took it down to his brother, Daryl. She said he was the most responsive I'd seen him in months to see that it was a book about his brother. And I said, that kind of makes you feel good. Because this is not going to be a million seller. You get the little moments of satisfaction out of it. And that was one of them.
Right. Well, I hope that I can do my part to help get the word out. It is a good book. It's a very interesting story. There's no question about that.
Well, thank you. And I like it. I like him as a subject. One thing I learned in writing is that subject matter, in terms of sales, it's all subject matter. You write the Derek Jeter story, and you're going to sell a lot more than you write the Dick Stewart story. But I like writing the Dick Stewart story. It's interesting to me. It's done in a way that people can learn things they didn't know. And one thing I tried to do was bring in, it says the life and times of, and it really is the life and times of. wrote about a lot of other things that were going on at the time in baseball. About Bobby Bragan. How did Bobby Bragan end up where he ended up? Dick wrote. People like that. What was going on in baseball at the time? And to me, that's what makes it interesting, because you can't just take somebody out of their time. You got to put them in the context of their era.
Right. So you brought up the fact that Stuart was a little bit of a recluse. If Stuart really wanted to be a recluse, there was no better place for him to go than Japan. Why did he go to Japan to play baseball? Was it that no major league team would sign him?
Yes, he was at the end of the road. He was with the Dodgers, and the Dodgers had no room for him in spring training. And he got an pretty good offer from Japan. In those days, the Japanese were paying good money for older U.S. players. It was financial, and he said something like, now I've become a nobody. Maybe over there I can be a somebody again. He was hoping for fame, but Dick Stuart was not the kind of guy to blend into a foreign environment like Japan. He did not fit in well, and you mentioned Joe Pepitone earlier. Joe Pepitone was infamous for his behavior in Japan the brief time he played there. Stuart was not well accepted by his teammates. He was a loner, didn't fit in, and kind of the ugly American.
Right. Talking to Bill Ryczek, the author of Dr. Strangeglove, The Life and Times of All-Star Slugger Dick Stuart, here on the Jacob Valk Show. I'm Jacob Valk. And Bill, I'll get you out on this. This is the big question when people think of Dick Stuart. If they really use their noodle and think about it, this is the big question. If the DH was around when Stuart played, how different do you think his career would have been?
Very. One thing I said was that Dick was born ahead of his time. He was a bad fielder in the era before the DH. He struck out a lot at a time when strikeouts were considered bad. I mean, now 150 strikeouts is nothing. And he was a self-promoter at a time when you were not supposed to do that. It was pre-social media. If he was around today, he would be a DH making a lot of money, which he loved. He always liked money. He would be all over the place. He'd probably have a lot of deals, endorsement deals. Dick today would be a different. He would have been much better off playing today than he was playing when he did play.
You know who the modern-day comparison is for Dick Stuart? Let me tell you. It's David Ortiz.
That's an interesting comparison because Ortiz was no great shakes with a glove. And he was a nicer guy, I think, than Stuart. But same thing, big personality, lots of power. And Ortiz was, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. And Dick is largely forgotten.
Right. Well, I mean, look, if Stuart was around today, he certainly would have lasted longer. And he may have been on a Hall of Fame trajectory. He was that talented. It was just the fact that he was Dr. Strangeglove, and he was a little bit of a wackadoodle, to put it nicely, that held him back. All right, Bill, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Jacob.
All right, that was Bill Ryczek. His book is Dr. Strangeglove, The Life and Times of All-Star Slugger Dick Stuart. Thanks for listening. Here comes the outro. Thanks for the plug, unpressured by the clock, Jacob. It does mean a lot. I'm sorry, I need to end now. I really don't have a lot of time, okay? I'm sorry. I never do this. I don't like doing this. This makes me really upset, but I have to give you a show. I hit on the main points. I'd have liked to have gone a little more in depth, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. Until Monday, I am Jacob Valk saying that I'm an Eclipse player. You don't see me very often.